I put it out to the guys, like, who is someone that you want to see? And then everyone was like, Jared Chavez. I was just like, all right, cool. I'll send him a message.
Honestly, well, yeah, I appreciate it, man. I'm surprised if you just keep posting and you just keep putting your stuff out there and putting it, making things that are relatable and accessible. That's really what people look for, especially in our industry, and that was the only character that I had in my portfolio at that time. Oh, looks like my strobe light's happening. They're gonna be like, oh, what happened to your lighting? It's strobing.
I'll put this in the blooper reel. Thanks so much for giving us your time, and hopefully
yeah,
we
for
can
sure, man.
pick your brain about a few things. First thing I actually wanted to talk about was, obviously it's a big deal, making it on trending Artstation or ZBrush Central or something like that. But what was it like getting it to the install page of Marmoset?
Oh man, that one was a surprise because like you mentioned, hitting trending on Artstation, that's always a big one. But I remember back when I was, first starting out, I started 3D in 2011 and I started using ZBrush in 2012, I think was what it was. And so I used to like see all the ZBrush Central and I was like, oh, I got to be on the top page of that. That would be awesome, you know? And I would like spam posts, like hoping like, oh, my work's going to get up there. It never did.
Yeah.
But then eventually, like I started doing the Artstation Learn course for Artstation, and then that piece, did pretty well. So they messaged me and they were like, "Hey, can we, make that as like the spotlight piece for the next release?" And I was like, "Hey, yeah, sure. Like, I love Marmoset. I've been using it for a long time. I'd be happy to, be the splash screen." And that wasn't actually my first interaction with them. They had messaged me for the piece, the frog piece that I did based on Della Longfish's concept.
Yep.
And they were like, oh, we have a Valentine's Day promotion coming up. Can we like use yours as like the promotional image?
Really?
I was like, yeah, heck yeah, So that was kind of like my first interaction. And so then since then I've kind of like interacted with Marmoset, more frequently. And then they had contacted me about the Artstation learning stuff. But yeah, it was always a fun thing. Like I have people at work that would be like, oh, I see that you're on the splash screen. I'm like, guys, it's really not that big of a thing. But yeah, no, it was cool. That was definitely like kind of one of those bucket list sort of things to kind of check off, to be like, yeah, I made it on a splash screen. It's kind of cool, I guess.
I mean, it's kind of like the ultimate level of approval, right? It's like the software you're using is like, you are the headpiece of like what we want to be saying is what the work is. So
yeah, and I mean, for Marmoset, it was always cool because like I love Marmoset. I'm a big Marmoset user for my renders just because I think it's super easy, super user friendly. I like to stick in real time. I don't like to, play with Arnold. Unreal, it gets a little bit more complicated, a little bit harder to kind of like get a good final result if you don't know what you're doing.
Yep.
So Marmoset's just like straight out the box, you throw something in, you have the HDRIs and like a cool library of materials and a lot of functionality in those shaders. So that's kind of why I've always stuck with it. And then on top of that, like I'm 100% a firm believer in like the Marmoset baking software.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's the best application that it has for like production type of work.
Yep.
And I use that all the time. It's great to be able to bake out a normal map and find the issues right in the viewport and paint them out. So that's kind of like a big reason why I use it in my workflow, like in production, making my characters.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, it kind of weaseled its way into that sort of part of my pipeline. And rendering, it's just kind of my go-to. I'm comfortable with it. I can get good results quick, and that's kind of what I want, especially in personal work. I just want to get something in, get it out. I don't want to have to tinker with building shaders and try and make things like overly complex if I don't have to.
So you use a lot of the procedural stuff inside of Marmoset when you do texturing in there?
I actually don't texture in there.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
I've never textured it. I've never textured in Marmoset.
Yep.
I know that it's an option. It's one of those things where it's just, I haven't had the time to sit down and like try it out.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like it has some cool, powerful tools, but like, again, it kind of goes back to like, do I want to disrupt my workflow that I already have established
Yep.
for a new tool and kind of learn that process? or just kind of stick with what I can. So if there's a reason that I have to transfer kind of texturing into Marmoset, I would, but I haven't really had that reason yet, you know?
Gotcha.
So, I mean, it does add a little bit of a hitch in the workflow because I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to bake over in Marmoset and then bring the files over into, you know, Painter and oh, well, I need to make a fix. So I have to go back to Marmoset.
Yep.
And, you know, it's a little bit of a chore, but it's not terrible, you know?
Yeah, well, that's a pretty good segue. The first time I actually saw your work was on the pixel peeping thing with Jay, where you guys like went pretty deep on that Ricky project that you did for Artstation Learning. You used Marmoset and Unreal for that, right?
Yeah, so that was an interesting project because the original purpose of it was to make a character for Artstation Learning.
Yep.
It was supposed to be like a full character, making it for an art test, and you know that was supposed to be the whole point of it. Parallel to while I was making it, because I always had the intent of putting it inside of Marmoset. I didn't like want to do the Unreal side of it. Decagon, who they contracted me originally for the whole project, they were doing like a sci-fi alley sort of scene for their Artstation Learning course. And they were like, well, they kind of fit hand in hand. Would you mind putting it into Unreal? So it seemed like an interesting kind of opportunity where I could take the two engines and kind of try and get the same look out of both of them.
Yep.
I did run into some, you know, challenges with that just based off of the fact that like I was running ray tracing inside of Marmoset as opposed to Unreal.
Gotcha.
I didn't have an RTX card, so I couldn't support the path tracing at that point.
Yep.
But yeah, so it just kind of was an opportunity to like compare apples to apples a little bit, you know, and see what was what I liked better, what had a little bit nicer look, what I liked about Unreal, what I liked about Marmoset. So that was kind of how the project unraveled and how I ended up doing both. And, you know, one thing that as anyone's probably seen with my work, I try to get the most out of it. So if I can take a project and I can find another way to show it or another way to use it, you know, I've spent months and months making something. I'm going to take it a little bit further in hopes that I can kind of, you know, squeeze another post out of it, I guess.
Yeah, no. I'm definitely going to touch on that, you know, kind of following in your footsteps. I want to be picking your brain about the way that you go through all that kind of stuff. But as far as the Artstation Learning piece that you did, was that sort of like your first soiree into tutorials and clipping up and recording and your process of your work?
It was my second time. I made an eye tutorial like in 2020, I think, like right when the beginning of the pandemic happened. And that was kind of my first time like, oh, I want to make something and, you know, throw it on the asset store, see how it sells. So that was my kind of first time doing that. And then I knew Decagon prior to them contracting me because I had done some freelance work for them right out of college sort of time frame, because I knew Clinton, who was the owner of that, and he like I was doing environment art stuff at that time. So that's how I kind of gained a relationship with him there. And so he was like, yeah, we're doing this Artstation Learn thing, would you be interested in it? We need a character artist, you know, I know you. And I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, I've never really done tutorial stuff. Like I did it once, I can try it again. So that was definitely a really big learning experience on how to kind of juggle making a character while filming it, while writing scripts, while editing it all together, while recording audio, and just kind of that whole process of putting it together. And it's a chore, man. It takes a lot of effort to do. You know, and you think of even just making a character in and of itself takes a crap load of time. It took just as much time to write the scripts, edit it all, put it all together, you know, and there's like hours and hours and hours of footage that I didn't even end up using. But yeah, so that was kind of how I got into the realm of doing the videos. And then that has just kind of snowballed into where we're at today, ultimately.
And that was literally what I was going to ask, like juggling the YouTube side of things and the art, and then trying to find like a nice balance of the two of them, because the YouTube, or just let's call it recording in general, and then clipping and then making it look sexy, that's a whole job in itself. Like that's literally a creative piece in itself. Yeah,
for sure. And I've now gotten to the point where anytime I work, I open up OBS and I'm just recording it. I kind of work with the intent of turning it into something. you know, if you watch my recent YouTube videos, those are all pieces that I finished last year, and I'm still having to like take the time to finish writing the scripts, editing it together, and trying to put together something that, you know, makes sense, is useful, that people can hopefully find some sort of information out of. So it's definitely a chore. It's, you know, it's not easy to like juggle that side. That is the side that I put like the most kind of like thought to. When it comes to anything like social media, you know, Instagram, honestly, as low rent as possible is kind of what I stick to. That's sort of my mantra with that stuff. You know, the stuff that does well on social media has always been like crap posts, things that I take 10 seconds to think about or make. And I just push it out, and people are like, wow, this is funny, or this is cool, or this is behind the scenes. And that's most of what I try to push out on there, is like behind the scenes stuff. That stuff all does better than my actual finished pieces 90% of the time. People don't care about the finished piece. They like to see like the process. They like to see how I did something. They like to see the details. They like to see me just sculpting on it. So that took a little while to kind of figure out. And I still like obviously show finished pieces, but I try to just show like making of or process sort of stuff more so, because I think that kind of does better for me. But yeah, so it's kind of a whole beast tackling the two separate ones, you know, and YouTube is definitely time consuming, a lot harder to sit down, set the mic up, write a script, you know, figure it all out. But they're both fun, you know, and I feel like at this point I'm kind of in a groove of how I like to do them, at least, and what I can do and with the time that I have available, you know?
Yeah. It's good. That's good to know, because, you know, as someone who's sort of entering it in like, more or less the first, second year of doing this stuff, and seeing people like you like paving the way, pulling back the curtain, and then being like, you know what, some of the best stuff that I do is I just throw up random shit on Instagram, and it's what people like to see.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's one thing that, you know, Instagram is like all glitz and glamour, and you know, TikTok and all these social medias, it's like, oh well, how is some, like, I get the question all the time, like, do you ever sleep? Yes, I sleep. I just use crap that I made years ago. Like, at the end of the day, someone who's finding me on Instagram is finding me years after the fact of what I've already produced. So why am I not going to use that to, you know, continue to put myself out there? So yeah, I try not to put too much thought into it. I don't take it seriously, but I think I'm a prime example of like, if I can do it, anyone can, you know? I think all you really have to be successful, at least in my opinion, is some decent art, and an obsessive compulsive desire to just hit a number, not necessarily for the fact of hitting a number, but just because it's like a fun game, like, well, can I do it? You know? And that's kind of what I tell myself, and that's kind of like my drive, is like, I've seen results, so I'm like, well, why can't I hit 100,000 on YouTube? Why can I not hit 100,000 on this? If I just keep posting, eventually I'll get there, you know? And so I'm not the best artist by any means, but if you just keep posting and you just keep putting your stuff out there and putting it, you know, making things that are relatable and accessible, that's really what people look for, especially in our industry, you know?
No, I love it, man. That's a really, really good outlook on it, because it can sometimes feel like, say you had nothing to do with Instagram or social media or anything, and you were purely an artist, right? It can feel sometimes like you're paddling upstream at the best of times, even when you are just focusing on that one thing. So to be able to have like this, almost like this track record that you've got, like a timeline of YouTube and social media and all this kind of stuff, and you can see, like, I can scrub through it now and see the progression that you've had as an artist as well, and like how well you've progressed literally through the timeline. Like, it's pretty awesome to see.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, it's, you know, it's fun. Like I said, I try not to take it too seriously. I just have fun with it. I post things that I find interesting. I don't put much thought into them. Sometimes I'm like, oh, well, I have this idea. Let's, like, you know, knock it out real quick. But for the most part, people don't care about your production value. With the stuff that I've like bought over time, it's all just kind of been money that's funneled back into it. So like, the only reason I have, well, actually all of these lights that I have set up are from like years ago that are actually my wife's lights. You know, the camera is my wife's. Like, none of this stuff is like fancy equipment. This is all just stuff that I had, fortunately laying around. But
Yeah.
I don't put any of this to use except for in situations like this where it's
Yeah.
like, hey, do you want to do an interview? I was like, well, I guess I feel like I might, try and spruce myself up a little bit,
Nah, it's good. So all the success is to her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is, because she's always like, oh, you need to go work, you need to go do stuff. Yeah, go do it. She's incredible. She's very supportive about what I do. And, she's my biggest fan, and I appreciate that. She always makes me feel incredibly special. And, that's always a good thing to have in your corner is someone that kind of, boosts you up a little bit more.
Absolutely, dude. Yeah. It's good to have someone there that can keep you, grounded and always be patting on your back as well. So
yeah, for sure. And even, just kind of touching on that too, I think that that's something important. And hopefully I'm a reflection of that, is like social media, YouTube, posting your art, all this stuff. It doesn't have to detract from like the rest of your life. It doesn't have to consume your life. Me and my wife, we go on walks, we go to dinners, we go and we live a normal life.
Yeah.
We enjoy spending time together every single day, and I'm still able to kind of manage it because I don't feel the need to like put a lot of effort into it. I don't feel the need to put a lot of time into it, and I've still, for the most part, found success out of that. So hopefully that's, useful for someone to hear. I just thought I'd throw that in there as well,
For sure, man. I mean, and it's only until you do start like speaking to people that are in the industry, how they juggle their life, because sometimes it can see through the window of a phone or a screen that it's like, this is this person's whole life and this is the only thing that they do. When in reality, it's like, for a lot of people who have been in it for a long time, it's a job and they still enjoy doing bits and pieces, but for the most part, you do it so that you can have a fun life that you enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, that is one thing. There's two types of people in the industry. There's people that are like, I have my day job, I don't need to do stuff outside of work. For me, there's also people like me who are like, well, I love doing personal work. Personal work brings me a lot of joy. I like find relaxation in that fact.
Yep.
So you can be either or. You don't have to like beat yourself into the ground doing this. I don't beat myself into the ground doing it. I just love doing it, So like, would I rather play a video game? Sometimes, but majority of the time I'd rather like come in here and work on some work, make videos. I find a lot of fulfillment out of all of that different stuff. So for me, that's what makes me joyful. But you don't have to like, do YouTube and post on Instagram and all these things to become successful. Success is just dependent on what you consider successful at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure, dude. If we go back to the start, sort of, I remember seeing a post that you put up. It was the lone wolf character, and I remember because there's been a couple of posts of it, I don't know exactly which one it was, but I remember the caption that you put on it said something about this was the piece that changed the trajectory of my career.
Yeah. Yep, for sure.
Why was that?
That's a funny story. So, I like to tell stories. I like to talk about how
I love to listen, man. Let's go.
Not because I think, not because like of a reflection of me, but I think it's useful for people to hear, because I used to always love hearing those stories.
Sure.
I used to love seeing how people got to where they were.
Yep.
And so for me, after I finished college, I didn't feel like I was good enough to get a job, so I never applied to anywhere.
Yeah.
And I started working at Northrop Grumman, which is like an aerospace contractor for the government.
Okay.
And while I was there, I did like VR stuff, so I was kind of still working in 3D.
Yeah.
And while I was working in 3D, I was still working on characters outside of work. That was still kind of my main drive, but I was attending CGMA. And while I was attending CGMA, I was getting all this knowledge about characters. I was doing stuff for environments. And then I finished that, and I still was like, you know what? I don't think I'm ready. I don't think I'm good enough to get a job in the industry. So then a mentorship happened with Glauco Longhi, and I was like, oh yeah, for sure, got to take that. He's always been a big inspiration for me. I've always loved his work. And so I signed up for the mentorship with him, did a character, was like, I feel like I'm close, but I still don't feel like I'm quite good enough. I feel like I'm getting there, but I didn't feel quite there yet. And after I finished that, it just so happened that there was an Artstation learning course Artstation challenge course that was going on. And I was like, well, seems like a cool opportunity to make another character for my portfolio. Literally had no thought in the world of like placing or anything like that. And I submitted my final piece, and I ended up coming in first. So that was the piece that I did for that contest. And that kind of like cemented me finding a job ultimately, because after I had won that competition, that's when like companies had started emailing me. So like Respawn reached out and they were like, hey, we're working on a Star Wars game, are you interested in participating in it? I was like, yeah, sure, that seems pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know, like that seemed like an awesome first place to start. So I interviewed with them. Unfortunately, I didn't end up getting it, obviously. But then Turtle Rock contacted me. They're like, hey, we're working on this IP. We can't tell you about it, but do you want to work on it?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, you know, and so they flew me out to California. I interviewed with them, and then they offered me the job, and then I started working on Back 4 Blood. So that is really the piece that like kind of changed the trajectory for me into getting me a job. And so that's one key reason why I always say, like, people are like, oh, well, how many portfolio pieces do I need? You don't need any number. You just need one piece that shows that you can do the job and that you can do it well.
Yeah.
And for me, that's ultimately what ended up happening, is I had that one piece that was viewed by people. It was kind of spread around because of the contest.
Yep.
And one thing kind of led to another, and recruiters were like, hey, do you want a job? And I was like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's
sure,
crazy.
I'd love to. And so that's kind of how it all panned out. So it was honestly by a stroke of luck. I was very fortunate. I never applied for a job to get into the game industry. I was just kind of fortunate where I just was handed an opportunity, and yeah, that's kind of how I got to where I am, I guess.
Wow, man, that's so interesting. Like, because I think that is a question that comes up quite a lot, which is, how many pieces do I need? What do I need? Like this, if you were to tell everyone you just need one like shit hot piece that can get eyeballs going, I feel like that would motivate a lot more people as well, because you see it a lot. You see a lot of unfinished things, or you see things just at that 90%, like you were talking about before about squeezing everything out of it. That almost that last 5-10% of every project is the part where you're like, man, this is I can see how much effort has gone into this, and thing that separates everyone, right?
100%. Yeah, 100%. I think that you know, one of the really big things that I've learned over time is presentation in your pieces is just as important, if not more important, than the rest of your project.
Yep.
And the reason for that is because in a lot of ways you spend months and months and months working on something, but if I just throw like, you know, a textured model in a basic scene, you know, an HDRI light that's not really adding any interest to it, it's not accentuating forms, things like that. The color is just a gray background, you know, there's not much going on to it. You're just doing a disservice to your work.
Yep.
So if you put in the extra effort to throw some nice lighting in there, to, you know, break down the image, to show it against a nice background, or whatever, pose your character, all of that stuff really elevates it. And so like, you know, with my work, that's what I try to do with every project, is take it to that point. And so now it's kind of become ingrained in me where like, I don't like to release work unless it's at that state. You know, I'll show work, but I won't release it. I won't just like sculpt a model. Okay, here's the model, that's it, it's done with. Here's a ZBrush render, and that's all you're going to see of it, you know? Yeah. So, yeah, that's the important thing, is finish your work.
Yeah, love it.
That goes a long way.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice, man. So you don't apply, you get the job, you fly over to Cali.
No, I didn't. Yeah, it's a very weird situation. Yeah, honestly.
But you land the job at Back 4 Blood. What was your role that you got there?
So that's an interesting question. When I got there, I was a character artist.
Yep.
I was just a base level character artist. I didn't come in as a junior. I know that there were people that did come in as juniors there, but I was fortunate where they just brought me on, and right away I started working on like clothing for the zombies, and then not much longer after that I was making like the survivor characters, and then, you know, making the special infected. So I think that, you know, they kind of figured that I had the ability to do that, so they never really brought me on as a junior, which was cool. You know, I think it was kind of reassuring. Going back to the whole discussion before, I was really afraid to apply. I thought that I wasn't good enough. And so it was a little bit of like a validation to like be brought on as like a base level character artist. And, you know, so I guess with that just goes apply. You know, you don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, so that's ultimately how I got into the spot, and kind of what I started doing right away.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was pretty much what ended up kind of happening.
Yeah, cool. Well, so you started just doing basically like additions to characters. Did you work on any like full characters from start to finish?
Yeah, so when I started, the first thing that I did was make a zombie outfit. I made a shirt
Yep.
and pants, and then I finished that, and then they were like, okay, you're gonna make a couple more shirts and pant combinations. So I made like 3 or 4 of those, and then they were like, okay, we want you to make a full zombie from head to toe. And it was just like cannon fodder zombie, you know, like the zombies aren't like the big wow creatures. They're kind of background.
Yep.
You know, you just shoot them, they're on screen, whatever.
Sure.
I finished that, and then they were like, oh hey, we have survivors that you have to make. Here's one. And so I started making Walker, and he was my first survivor that I made. So it was pretty quick that I got on to just doing the full characters. So yeah, that was the first one that I did. And then, you know, I just kept doing the survivors. And then I was we were a team of 3 when I got onto that project. It was me, my friend KB, and Jay. And KB left the project, so it was me and Jay for a long time. And I was like the first one to sit down and tackle an infected, because my friend KB had done an infected, but then he left the studio. So then it was like, oh, Jared, you're up next for the infected.
Yep.
And so I kind of like had to really kind of figure that out. Monsters are hard. They're really tricky. You know, a lot of people have a lot of different opinions, and we hadn't ironed out the process of making them. So that was like a whole new challenge for me, especially because like up to that point I had taken a creature class, but I wasn't good at creatures. I didn't really want to do creatures. They kind of freaked me out a little bit in terms of like, not because they're scary or anything that, but just because they're a challenge. They're difficult because you're making things up. There's a lot more like creative intuition that you have to have when making them, and I didn't have that. I didn't feel like I had that, so it was kind of like, here, make a creature, and I'm like, you know. But then I ended up making the Wretch, and the Wretch was my favorite character that I made on that project, and I think is still the one that people like the most. So you know, I think I kind of just underestimated my ability a little bit, you know. So which clearly is a running theme. I think that we all kind of tend to underestimate what we're actually capable of, and you just kind of have to trust yourself a little bit. And I did, and it panned out, and I made a lot of really, really fun creatures, and now I just love to make creatures in my free time. That's what I like to do over humans, and here we are.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that's it. After throwing yourself in the little bit of the deep end, or something, the out of the comfort zone sort of thing, you found. Yeah, that's interesting. That's cool to know, man. So you were at Turtle Rock for about 4 years?
Yeah, so I was there from 2019 until what year are we? 2024, the beginning of 2023.
Yep.
So I was there for majority of the production of Back for Blood, and then I worked on the 3 DLCs that came out.
Okay, cool. And I'm guessing you would have had a great sounds like you had a great experience working there. Talking about moving out of the comfort zone, you then take the leap to then move over to Firewalk.
Yeah, which again, funny story. I didn't apply for that job.
Oh, really? There you go.
Yeah, I was kind of in the middle of, I'd finished Back for Blood. I was like, you know, I've made a lot of zombies, I've made a lot of creatures. I'm interested to see what's next, what else is out there. And so I started to apply to a couple of places.
Yeah.
I had applied to Respawn again for a couple of positions that they had, and then I applied to Bungie, and you know, I had a couple of talks with them, but then I had a friend who I worked with at Turtle Rock, and he was like, hey, or he was actually a recruiter at Firewalk. He was like, hey, are you interested in joining this project? Your stuff came across the table that they were interested in you. And I told him that I knew you, so I wanted to reach out and see if you were interested. I was like, yeah, sure, let's talk it out, let's see what the project's about. And then I went through the interview process, really thought it seemed like a good fit for me, and told Turtle Rock, hey, I'm gonna head over to this studio. And they're like, cool, that's awesome, we wish you the best of luck. And then I ended up at Firewalk, and that is where I have been for the last year and 1 month, I think, is where I'm at now.
Yeah, so. Wow, that's super cool, man. And it's great when you can leave an employer like because at the end of the day, like we do try really hard to get to these places, and we kind of see them as greater than workplaces. Like it's more of like a proud thing to be able to get it. But when you do have to say, hey, look, I want to move on to something else, it's good to know that they can give you their blessing into moving on to something better.
Yeah, for sure. They were great. And the team that I worked with, I had a lot of great opportunities and great memories with all the people that I worked with, and they were all really supportive.
Yeah.
Even the higher ups, they were like, yeah, we wish you the best of luck. If things change, if you ever want to come back, let us know and we'll see what we have available. And so, I think that's always something that I've learned just in the workforce is like good work etiquette. I try never to leave a bridge burned or anything like that. I always want to be respectful of the places that I work and the people that I work with, and not leave them in bad conditions either. And so they were happy for me and excited for me. And, I still obviously am in contact with like a lot of my friends from there and things like that. That's just part of the industry too. It's a very kind of nomadic type of field where people come and go, especially in the arts field. They jump from project to project and, find other things out. And it's not ever usually anything personal. Sometimes it is, but majority of the time it's just people want to try different things out, and for me, that was kind of where I was at. Was I just wanted to do something different. I wanted to, see what else was out there and kind of see if I could work on something else that was exciting, that was different, that really kind of taught me new and interesting things.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially our industry, it's like different studios focusing on different art styles, and we all get into this industry because we're creative people, so we want to be able to be creative and not be pigeonholed into anything. Have you ever thought of, is the gaming pipeline as far as the art sort of been where your passion has always been, or has the VFX side, maybe that's something I want to try out one day?
So when I was in college, I actually originally wanted to work in VFX. I wanted to work in film and movies, and I wanted to work at Blur. I wanted to work at ILM, all those notable studios that everyone wants to work at. But I remember I had a class where it was like kind of a self-guided class with an instructor. And I was like, oh, I want to learn how to make game characters. So I did that. And that was the first time that I worked with a game engine. And being able to like view my stuff in real time, that's when I was like, oh no more VFX, never going to VFX. The idea of hitting a button and waiting, that was always like the worst possible thing when it came to being in a VFX pipeline. And so that kind of drove me away from it a little bit. Obviously, like the level of detail and quality that you can get out of it is insane, but look at games now. We're getting the bridge is not that much bigger. So I did want to. As for the future, I don't know if I would. I think there would have to be a specific reason for me to, I guess, to make that jump, just because the fact that like you don't hear great things about it. You hear that the game industry has like ups and downs, and there's obviously been a lot of layoffs and things like that, but like all of that stuff is very commonplace for films, people getting laid off and quick projects, and you're a lot of contractor work, long hours. So from what I've heard, it kind of doesn't sound too enticing, at least in this point in my career. I would love to, just because the fact of like, my mom doesn't play video games. She's never going to play my video games. Whereas like if I made a movie, she would go watch it. And so there is that like appeal of doing things that's a little bit more accessible for some of the people that I really care about to see my work, but they support either way, so it's not a huge deal.
That's it. It's just it's funny you say that, because the medium of the art that we do, it's like the barrier of entry, like I've spoken about it before, the barrier of entry of video games is it's difficult for some people because they don't pick up controllers, they don't sit down they don't engage like we have, or the people that are in the industry have. So sometimes there is that external thing that comes in where you're like, hey, maybe I need to work on something else so they can see what I do.
Yeah, for sure. And like I have a handful of nephews, and a couple of them really love video games. They love Pokemon, they love Fortnite, they love video games. And so like I want them to be able to see the stuff that I make and be able to hopefully enjoy it. And so for video games, it's a little bit more accessible for them. There's films that might be accessible for them, but I don't know, it's hard. I think for the foreseeable future, I want to stick in games just because I have a good time with them. And also one really big reason why I'm happy with the game industry is in film, you work on something that can be seen for half a second. You could be working on some background people that aren't important. You can be working on, a range of stuff that isn't the main character. In games, if you're working at a studio and that is their IP, you're probably working on someone that's going to have screen time.
Yeah.
Back 4 Blood as example, all of the characters that I worked on were all heavily in cinematics. They were all heavily in the gameplay. You saw them up close and personal, so you always kind of got to see the work that I'd done.
Yeah.
So I think for me, that's also a big thing too, is I don't want my work to kind of like, I want people to see it. I want to be like, yeah, that is what I made, and not have to be like, oh, sorry, you missed it.
Yeah.
So that's a great thing about games, I think.
Yeah. Well, I also think that you and I are a little bit twisted in the way that the technical side of gaming, of making gaming assets, is also a little bit fun. Like the things that some people would be like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. I actually sort of like the technical side.
Yeah, for sure. The technical side's fun. I know people like hate some of those aspects.
Yeah.
As you start to do them longer, they become a little bit more like relaxing and therapeutic, UVs, retopology. I just throw movies on and just kind of jam out while I'm doing them. And, it's a little bit more relaxing. It's kind of a step back from like the constant intense nature of like, what are these forms supposed to look like? How am I translating this 2D drawing to a 3D form? Like, how am I going to kind of solve these issues?
Yeah.
And it's a lot more just kind of like mind numbing, like, okay, there's a process, there's, you have to think a little bit, but not quite as much and quite as hard.
No, I'm completely with you, man. Yeah, it's a strange thing to say, like when you tell people you like doing retopology, then you explain what it is and it's drawing squares, but
oh yeah, it is a very redundant process, but some people like redundancy. Sometimes it's a little bit nice. I guess the whole process in and of itself is kind of redundant, but
something that I wanted to ask you about. So if we're stepping away from the production side of things and we move into all the work that you've done, like you've got all this great character art that you've done that's not production character art, it's more portfolio pieces and stuff. One of the biggest talking points I think with people that get into the industry is deciding on concept art and what to base their portfolio pieces on. Understanding the importance of choosing a concept. Something about your portfolio from top to bottom, even if I was a recruiter or not, or seeing yours would stand out immediately because of your choice of concept art, independent of the skills. Obviously your skills are there, but what can you touch on as far as choosing concept art and the way that you do it? Because it obviously works.
Well, I appreciate that. Honestly, I wish there was like some secret to it, but majority of the time it's picking things that I want to work on.
Sure.
Picking things that are of interest to me, like I have been on a massive bender of doing Stephen Oakley concepts. One, because I love his work. I think all of his work really resonates with me, and everything that he makes, I'm like, oh, that would be so much fun to make in 3D, and especially because like I mentioned earlier, I love creatures. Ever since I was on Back 4 Blood, I love doing creatures, and he does creatures and he does them well, And so I always try and find things that I guess inspired me growing up, like there's touches of fan arts that I've done, like the Neomorph piece that I did. I'm a big Alien fan. The orc that I made, love Lord of the Rings. So finding those things that kind of fulfill that like fan art sort of niche is a big thing too. I try to find things that are fun. That I enjoy making. They're things that I would want to make in a production if I had the opportunity to. So that's usually kind of how I make my decision. I choose concepts that are things that I ultimately want to make, and that's not going to be like a chore to make, So that's usually what I would say is the best kind of route to go, is finding something that makes you happy. I don't try and do the most complicated pieces in the world. I try to do things that are manageable. Sometimes I shoot myself in the foot and I pick something and I'm like, oh man, this is like a tall order to make it. But for the most part, I just do things that kind of make me happy, things that are fun, things that I enjoy, and hopefully that like I can bring a little bit of myself into. A lot of the concepts that I've been doing as of the past couple of years have been more 2D drawings without color. They're just like 2D sketches. Like a lot of what Oakley does is like 2D sketches. A couple of them have like color and things like that. The Neomorph was just based on a 2D sketch by Rob Bliss, and so there was a lot of like freedom that I could take with those pieces and kind of like imbue my own take or style or texture or forms, or there's just a lot of stuff that I got to solve. But that's kind of ultimately how I end up choosing pieces, I guess.
Cool. I think the thing that sticks out for me the most is the uniqueness of the character itself. Like it's not a Kratos, or it's not a Thanos, or it's not a, the classic things that people do when they put them in their profile. And you immediately start comparing these things to some of the greatest character artists that ever lived, and it's like, well, you're shooting yourself in the foot before you've even started, because you're going to be comparing it to this. So the fact that you did Ellie, but you did a spin on it, and it's like this amazing different thing that you've never seen, and then I just think it's a really cool way to approach it. And for something that I think people don't really put enough value into when they're deciding to put their effort into a portfolio piece, it's like, just pivot a little bit and do something that is going to be a lot more visually intriguing.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that it's interesting that you said that, because I think that that's something that I try to do with all of my pieces. Is I love multiple mediums of art, not that I'm good at them, but like, I love the quality of drawing. I love the quality of painting and oil painting and just all of these different mediums. So every time I make a piece, I try to, think about like, how can I really kind of amplify those feelings? So like there's the hands that I did that were based on paintings from Dennis Sarzin. I think that's how you say his last name. I could be completely butchering it, but like, I loved that quality of like painterly strokes. And I was like, well, how can I try and kind of mimic that? Same thing with the Ellie piece, where I was like, well, how can I like pull the essence of the concept that it was based off of and translate it to 3D? Same thing with the Oakley pieces that I did. I like wanted to make those feel like they were a little bit more like a painting in 3D, as opposed to just like, oh, well, I sculpted a creature and here's the forms and, there's hyper realistic detail. Like, no, I wanted to kind of pull that quality out of it. And so I think for me, that's something that's kind of like my own touch or drive, I guess my own style in a sense, whatever you classify that as. But that's something that I love to do, something that I like to imbue in my characters and try and push and, kind of mix the reality. Like, when someone looks at something, are they going to think like, oh, this is a 2D drawing? If I get them to think that's a pretty cool feeling, because I'm like, ha, gotcha. So that is something that I like to do with my art, along with like the vibrant colors and like really kind of like dramatic tones to a lot of the stuff that I do as well. Awesome, man. Well, I mean, it's a great way to network using Artstation, like being able to have your thing, or LinkedIn or YouTube or any of these types of things. Coming from Australia, we don't really have the light boxes and the GDCs and the ZBrush summits and all that kind of stuff. I would like to go to them. I would like to go to one day. Hopefully this year I'll get over there. Have you been to any of them? And if so, are they valuable, and what's your favorite one? Yeah, for sure. So I've been to SIGGRAPH. I went to SIGGRAPH in 2014, 2015, something like that. It's been a long time. It's probably been about 10 years since I went. Okay. Which, mind you, I just bought a ticket to California, bought my ticket to that, went by myself, walked around the show floor by myself. I remember I didn't really know what I was in store for. I went to a couple of talks that were like way over my head. But the ZBrush booth was there at that time. I just went and sat at the ZBrush booth and just watched like artist after artist do a demo and, show things from God of War, show things from whatever other IPs were like really popular at the time. And back then was like, there was multiple artists there that I loved. And so I really just sat there and watched them, and I enjoyed it because I got to meet a couple of them, and that's one of the things too, is they're valuable because you're put in the same space as the people that are there, and all you have to do is go and strike up a conversation. And that's what I did. And I remember I talked to Jason Martin, which is a big inspiration for like my creature work. And I was like, so what do you think people should work on? And he was like, texturing. And ever since he said that, I was like, okay, I have to work on texturing. So he's like, people, character artists want to come in and they just want to like sculpt characters and that's it. But like, if you can texture, that's going to put you ahead of the game. Now texturing is a lot more commonplace, but I took that knowledge and I ran with it. And I think because of it, that is, I don't know if it's my strongest attribute, but I do think that that's something that I feel like I'm really comfortable with. And I think a lot of it was because I got that kind of motivation from him. So that was a good one. I don't know if I'd necessarily say it was the greatest, because like I said, I was young, I was by myself, I didn't know anyone there. I met a couple people. I didn't go to the job fair I was still like, I don't have a portfolio. I'm too scared to talk to people.
Yeah, sure.
But then I went to Lightbox this past year, and that was my first time at Lightbox. Amazing event.
Yeah.
That is an event 100% geared towards people like you and me, where you will meet everyone that you talk to will be either in the industry or one or two people removed from it, and everyone's super friendly. Everyone is more than happy to talk to people. I met people there that I've admired for a long time. I met Oakley in person. We'd always chatted. I finally had the opportunity to meet him. Ran into Jay there, which I hadn't seen him all year, so like we talked for a little while.
Yeah.
They have the ZBrush booth there, and you can talk to people from ZBrush. So it's a great opportunity to meet people, and everyone there is all kind of in the same boat. So that is one that I wholeheartedly would recommend to anyone that's interested in this industry. It's a great way to go and see art and talk to people face to face. Everyone's willing to like look at portfolios. If you know someone and you're like, hey, can I show you my portfolio? They'll talk to you. If you have questions. I talked to a couple people that were at a college down here in California, and they were like, oh, well, what do you think I should do? And I just was like, well, I'm going to ramble for a while, but hopefully you find some use out of it, but that's how everyone is. So yeah, those are the two events that I've gone to.
Yeah, cool.
I did go to ZBrush Summit. That's a lie. I guess I did go to ZBrush Summit like 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. It was the year before COVID happened.
Yep.
And that was also a really cool event. That one's an even better event, I think, because everyone there is like a character artist to some extent. There's a little bit more like environment, but majority of the people are there with the intent of like character art.
Yeah. Well, in my head, like, say exactly what you've just said. It just seems like the kind of place, it's almost like it just seems like another world that, like I said, we don't have here. So that's great to hear that they are beneficial. Something that's definitely going to be on my list this year.
Yeah, for sure, man. I would definitely recommend it to anyone that can make it. They're great opportunities to just talk to people and hang out and, get to know different people. And that's the one thing that I think that's really cool about our industry is everyone's really into meeting people. Everyone is really into talking about this stuff. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
So when people like message me, I always try my best to like respond and help people because it's something that I love. It's something I'm incredibly passionate about. Yeah. And I think everyone is like that, everyone, to be an artist in this field, you kind of have to be like that.
Yeah. Well, people ask that to me about this, the whole endeavor of doing YouTube stuff and meeting people and everything. And I was like, if you have to ask the question, you might not get it. But as a creative person and what we do, it's like, this is what I enjoy doing. I love hearing people who've, quote unquote, made it and how they got there and what makes them tick and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, just to go to a place like a conference that feels like it has a bunch of those types of people as well. It's like what we're doing exactly right now, except in real life. So yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's great, and like I have friends in the industry and stuff. And like when we meet up, we still just talk about the same things that we're talking about now. It's just all about art. It's all about games. It's all about what's going on and, the ins and outs of things. And so it's a very cool culture to be a part of.
Yeah.
I definitely am fortunate and, I definitely would recommend those opportunities for people. And it's always hard because like, as artists, we have this tendency to be a little bit more reserved into ourselves. And I get that. I'm the same way, and it may not seem like it, but I could sit in my room and not talk to a person for a week and I would be 100% fine with that.
Yeah.
But we all feel that way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like a common ground that we all share. And it shouldn't be scary. It may seem scary, but I can promise that everyone is happy to talk and to chat about all of this stuff and questions and things like that,
Yeah, amazing, dude. I actually forgot to preface that last one. That was one of the first Discord questions that one of the guys had about, but I've got a couple more here.
Yeah, for sure.
This is an interesting one. If you were a beginner today, knowing what you know, what would be some of your top do's and don'ts for starting off in 2024 as a 3D artist?
Oh man, I think that the biggest one for me, based on how I got to where I am, would be understanding art. understanding art principles and fundamentals.
Yep.
You know, I had an instructor who was like, oh, I have a brother who's a character modeler, you should learn art. And I was like, nah, I just need to learn how to brute force ZBrush and I'll get there. No, I needed to learn art.
Yeah.
I needed to learn how to understand form and anatomy and proportion and silhouette. And, you know, that was just me kind of trying to put off the hard work.
Yep.
And just hoping that I could do it without actually having to try those things. But as soon as I started to work on those things and try those things, I got loads better. And I didn't get that education until I started taking classes at CGMA. That was really where I started to learn that stuff. And that is the biggest thing that I would have done differently.
Yeah.
I think that would have probably taken some time off of my career trajectory, you know, to getting to where I am. Is studying art and actually making sure that stuff was cemented and I understood it. And it's hard because with art and like seeing what people do, and I think that this is like the struggle that people have, is they see stuff on social media and they see stuff on Artstation and they're like, well, I want to create that exact thing that someone else is creating at that exact level. But there's a lot of work that goes into that. And that's what people have to remember, is that you have to do the basics.
Yep.
You have to crawl before you can walk. You have to walk before you can run. Once you start running, it's great, but you have to do those things before you get to that point. Because if you don't, then you're just going to keep in a cycle of crawling ultimately, you know?
Yeah, dude, amazing insight, man. Like you can apply literally that mindset to, do you want to be a chef? Do you want to build a house? Do you want to be like, you need to know the fundamentals of the things that go into the step by step to get to that final thing, otherwise you might get something at the end that looks a little bit like it, but doesn't taste right, or it just doesn't look right, but you can't put your finger on why it is. And then a lot of the times it's the stuff that you can't see. Like you said, it's the anatomy and it's the silhouette, and it's the types of stuff that you need to be knowing from the very get-go.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, to some extent you can learn those things as you're doing it. And you won't even realize that you're learning them. And I think that that's what I was doing. Like, I was progressing in art, but I wasn't doing it at a sufficient rate when I first started, because the fact that I didn't know what I was trying to practice or what I needed to practice.
Yep.
So I was trying to run and I was learning how to take a couple of steps, but I was still fumbling. So the quicker that you know what are the things that make art good, the better you'll get, the quicker you'll get, because you'll know the things that you have to practice.
Yeah, awesome, dude. Awesome. Last question. This is good. Clicking the apply button for jobs is usually a bit of a gamble. Like sometimes a portfolio doesn't even really get looked at. What are some of the tips that you would have to respectfully reach out to someone if you think that you're not even getting looked at?
Oh man, that's a tricky one.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard because recruiters, they get tons and tons and tons of applications. But I think that they're in a similar boat where they're trying to find the best candidate for the job. And if you truly feel like you are a great candidate for something, reaching out and being like, hey, I think I might be a good fit for this role, explaining yourself, showing your work. And if not, you're at least introducing yourself to that person, saying, hey, I'm such and such, this is my portfolio, this position may or may not be available. If you think I'd be a good fit, I'd love to, you know, chat more about it. But you start to kind of sow those relationships. And ultimately, I think that's what helps people in a lot of cases, is if a recruiter knows you and thinks, oh, well, I looked at this portfolio and they were a really good fit for this position. They didn't hire you the first time, but they were a really good fit for that position. They'll remember that and they'll reach out.
Yeah.
So it's definitely tricky, but I think, again, going back to the networking sort of thing, it's scary, it's weird, it's hard, but at the end of the day, you miss all of the shots that you don't take, right? You know, so what's the worst that could happen? They could be like, oh, sorry, no. Okay, on to the next one.
That's it.
You know, that's really the kind of mindset that you have to have, is, okay, I'll find something else. You know, I'll keep applying. I'll keep asking people. It may get annoying. You may feel annoying. I feel annoying because I post online all the time, but I do it anyway because that's kind of what you have to do.
Yeah.
You just have to be your own advocate and you have to do what's going to yield results. And applying, messaging recruiters, asking people at studios, hey, this is my portfolio, what can I work on to hopefully get a job here? You know, things like that will all better your chances, I think.
Yeah, awesome, dude. Really, really great. I'd say if there's anything that you want to plug, but I know I'll put all your stuff down below, you know, all the links and everything.
Yeah, for sure.
People will probably already know you.
Hopefully, if you don't,
Yeah.
go follow whatever's posted down below.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you know, that said, for anyone who hasn't seen my stuff before, I like to make art. I like to make characters. If you like characters, come check them out. Come hang out. I stream occasionally and ramble for hours on end, which I've done in this interview too. So, you know, that's who I am. If you don't like hearing talking, then maybe don't come around.
Well, if they're on this channel, they'll probably like your channel 10 times better. So I'm sure you're going to get some people jumping over there. But yeah, thanks so much for your time, dude. Honestly, it's been a long time coming for me. I've been a big follower of you for a while, and all the, you know, like we said, the little things that you do that make where you are today, and seeing, you know, the squares and how you got there. It's it's really awesome, dude. So I'm really happy for you where you're at.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, and you know, here's a prime example, guys. If you ever are like, well, how do I make the first step forward? You just message people.
Yeah,
that's how we set this up, you know, and it just started with the message, and then here we are. And you know, and it's a prime example. Like, we will never forget this interaction.
Yeah,
and I will always have it in my head.
Yeah,
you'll always have it in your head, and that's how a connection starts. You know, there's no harm, no foul in just reaching out to people, talking to people, being active on social media, being active on Artstation. It does nothing but help you.
We're in the digital medium, man. We got to lean into it a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And not enough people do.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I did the whole like YouTube stuff, and like, who are the character artists that are on YouTube? Jay.
Yeah.
There's a couple of others here and there, but they're not like incredibly active.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, you know, maybe people listen to the stupid stuff that I have to say. I don't know. Maybe they won't. Maybe people will. Maybe they won't. But I'll put it out there in hopes that it helps someone, you know?
Yeah.
So
your stuff's awesome.
Here
dude.
I go.
Keep doing
just on another tangent again.
No, I love it, bro. Just keep doing it. Keep putting your stuff up there, because it matters. People want to watch it, me included. So
yeah, for sure, man. Well, I got some stuff in the works, so hopefully, you know, get another video or two out this month. That's the goal. So
awesome, man. Look forward to it.
Yeah, for sure, dude.
Thanks again, brother.